I'm ready, baby. Let's fire this sucker up. Here we go. Yo, let's go.
We're doing The Secret of Our Success, How Culture is Driving Human Evolution, Domesticating Our Species, and Making Us Smarter by Joseph Henrich. And you made this outline in November 2023. I didn't know it was that long ago.
I started the outline in November 2023, but as you know, it's probably 20, 30 hours of rereading the book, getting the notes, reading every chapter, trying to figure it out, and then you actually learn the book, Jay. That's why we do this podcast, because you actually learn the book.
Or we could do like our buddy Joel. I just watched the author interviews. That gets me the book, you know. We actually do read the book. And I just started, this is relevant, I just started Weird, his magnum opus book. In the intro, he says that Secrets of Our Success was supposed to be the first chapter of Weird. Like what kind of cultural, anthropological aspects of society, creation, and all that kind of stuff brought us to where we are, and he's like, it just exploded into a whole book of itself.
And what is Secrets of Success, Jay? I would call it the biological academic proof of cultural evolution.
Cultural evolution.
That is what Henrich is really, hey guys, cultural evolution is real. Like that's what he's saying, that's his statement with this book, right? And his method is, hey, let's look at all the behavioral, cultural, biological studies and find out what makes humans unique. Hey guys, it's really humans copying other humans' behavior, learning from each other. What do I call that? Cultural evolution, right? And so that's what he is saying. JD, this is a standard academic research book.
Absolutely standard.
We got a little formula for you guys out there if you're considering writing an academic research book. First, you must be a distinguished professor. You must collect hundreds of your favorite studies, including many from yourself and your grad students, and then write a sweeping narrative connecting them all. Note to prospective PhD students, this is sort of the end result of your entire career. Yeah, looking at Henrich's right here. And we created a special guide, Brother Book's Guide to Distinguished Academic Book. You have chapters such as Key Insight, Central Argument, Supporting Evidence, last chapter on Future Predictions, and you must wrap it up with a rhyming, punny, alliterative title that sums everything up in 3 words so people can never read your book and know what you're talking about. And inside that formula, Henrich, his thing is culture drives evolution, culture drives biological evolution, which is actually crazy when you really pause and think about that statement. And culture is what makes humans kings of Earth. So.
Yeah, it turns out he was actually very influenced in large part because of Guns, Germs, and Steel, which is a book that we're going to do. And that's basically why did Europeans invade other parts of the world and not other parts of the world invade Europe, you know? So I think he loves the big sweeping history books, and Weird was his answer to why the Europeans were invading other places. And this is his answer to how did we even, you know, get to a place where we're occupying every continent. You know, this is the book about how we get to every continent, and then Weird is how does one particular section of a continent invade the rest of the world. That's a good little sum up there.
Way to sweep us that sweeping summary, kind of sweep it together real nice. Now, it ain't just our individual big, beautiful brains, but it's how those brains collectively learn and connect with each other that make us powerful.
And mostly focused on like the last 100,000 years, kind of. It's more like 100,000 to 8,000 years ago, and then it, you know, doesn't deal with like modern issues of this copying, just like how do you get tool use and all that kind of stuff. Also, side note, we both messed this up. It's the secret of our success.
Oh, only one secret, not multiple secrets. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I think culture evolution is the big secret.
You know what the secret is? I'm gonna summarize it for all you kindergartners that listen to our podcast. We're not copycats, we're copy saps. Copy sapiens, copy saps.
How about that? That's a good one.
Okay, here we go. Getting into the book. Chapter 1, A Puzzling Primate. Skip. We've covered that in Brother Books before. Primates are kind of like humans, but they're not. Chapter 2, It's Not Our Intelligence That Makes Us Unique. So, Jay, what do we got here? Chapter 2.
Only one species of human across the entire globe. He sets this up really interestingly. I did listen to an author talk of his, and he's like, basically humans and ants dominate the entire world. They occupy every continent that can be occupied, every environmental niche, but ants have like 10,000 species. To be able to occupy all those niches, only one species of Homo. There's only one. And so his main point is we developed through cultural evolution the ability to learn and grow into all these different environments. It's how we conquered the whole world. He says chimpanzees are restricted to a narrow band of jungle in Africa and have already diverged into 3 separate subspecies, and they're just in one little area. And interestingly, it's actually, I forget what river, maybe the Congo River. On one side is chimpanzees, and on the other side is bonobos. How about that? It's just one river, and they're both separated, and it's a whole new species. Meanwhile, we're Homo sapiens in Britain, and we're Homo sapiens in Papua New Guinea, and it's just totally bonkers how that happened, because nothing like that has ever happened in the history of the whole Earth.
Chapter 2 starts off with a banging brother book study. Like, this is right down the fairway for what we like to talk about here. We love chimpanzees, and you know what we love? Intelligence
Toddlers.
tests between young chimps, young orangutans, and 2.5-year-old toddlers. What a study for us, okay?
Yeah.
So the test subjects we hear about, they're studying, or they're being tested in spatial reasoning, quantities / basic math, and causality / basic tool use, all right? So we're studying chimps, orangutans, and little kids. And interestingly enough, chimps and orangutans more quickly settle on optimal gameplay strategies for a lot of the weird behavior games economists play. Chimps even kill humans on speed memory tests.
Kill toddler humans, but yeah, still.
Toddler humans, excuse me,
Chimp
yes.
is much better with the speed memory and like location memory, all that kind of stuff. Much better.
Yeah, and the weird little like mini logic games. So far, chimps and orangutans are getting straight A's and humans are wearing the dunce caps. But where do human toddlers bring the intelligent smoke, Jay?
Social learning, your favorite. These studies, other chimps, orangutans, and people exhibit a behavior that solves a problem. So you have to watch someone, it's like unlocking a lock or something, there's a few steps or whatever, and you have to copy them to be able to learn how to do the problem, and toddlers crush the other primates. You just don't, there's not very much watching. I mean, you could watch someone fish a termite mound, but that's like a simple movement or whatever. They're not actually watching for complex physical movements. That's what we're programmed to do that they're not. The groundwork for social learning being our biological differentiator is laid down right in that study, one single study.
Toddlers crush everyone on learning from the adults in their society. Crush any other young mammal, right? That's chapter 2. Chapter 3, we're going to prove that it's not just individual brain power that gives us the magic, it's the collective brain power. And what a cool way to drive this point home about collective brain power than Lost European Explorers. That's the title of chapter 3.
This is such a cool framing, and I don't feel like anybody else has just collected all of these stories in one chapter of basically all the, these are the cutting edge. They have all the technology that has ever been invented. They have all of the knowledge. They're traveling with geologists and biologists, and they've been traveling the world or whatever. You get lost in a location without access to the cultural know-how that's been handed down through thousands of years, and you are absolutely effed. I mean, there's just no chance. None of these guys survive. Hit us some anecdotes.
Dude, we got 3 great anecdotes. Sir John Franklin, outfitted to the teeth by the British government in 1845. Would you go find us the stinking Northwest Passage, please? That's what we want. We're the British government. We want the Northwest Passage.
Wow.
Sir John's got 5 years of food. He's got a 1,200 book library.
5 years of food.
Dude.
12? That is out of control. People are like, they're waking up every day where he's going without breakfast. Every single day. And they're living just fine. They're having kids. They're taking care of their grandparents. Sir John Franklin's got, massive library, 5 years of food, and he's effed. He sails into the Hudson Bay, summer 1845, gets frozen in for what is this?
3 years he's frozen in the Hudson Bay, April 1848. He calls abandoned ship, dude. We're done.
Yeah, you'd think he would have called
105 guys on the ship. Wow. We're out. They met tons of Inuits, but they never figured out the Inuit tricks. Inuits intuited that they should stop helping when they noticed the Europeans were eating the limbs of their compatriots for dinner. The Inuits are like, all right, we ain't helping those guys anymore. They're cannibals, right? Hundreds of Europeans and a 1,200 book library, no match for the Arctic winter. Win one for the Eskimos' cultural adaptations.
Yeah, and it's not like this was the first group to venture into Arctic territory. You know, this is 1845. People have been sailing around those for a long time. We've picked up some knowledge, just not even close to the amount of knowledge that the people that have been living there for thousands of years got.
That have been culturally evolutioning there for thousands of years, right?
Yeah, moving on to the Burke and Willis expedition in the Australian outback, 1860. They're stranded, they're starving, finally find some aborigines and learn about a specific root of a certain plant that they could eat. Unfortunately, though, they didn't learn how to prepare the root. It's not enough to know what the root is. You have to learn like what to mix it with or how to cook it or you soak it or whatever it was. And so they died because they're eating like shit tons of this stuff. And they're just pooping it all out. They're wasting away. It's almost like the McCandless, the Into the Wild guy. You know, he was eating this plant that looked like a different plant, but you know, he wasn't able to digest it or whatever. That's what happened to these people. And yeah, you got to know how to prepare it.
The next expedition, Narvaez, Florida, 1528, lost, stranded, starving. He found some super tall and strong natives. He couldn't figure out how to get the seaweed and oysters that they ate. But he did get enslaved and got forced into female gender roles in the native tribes. This expedition, the guys escaped 8 years later at a huge tribal gathering, barely made it back to their preferred civilization. You can't brute intelligence your way to survive in areas that you're unfamiliar with. You can only culturally adapt your way to survive. That's the story of this chapter, right? If explorers don't mimic the locals, they don't learn everything the locals know, they die. And they all die.
Yeah, you think your window of figuring it out is a couple months tops. I mean, otherwise you're going to starve, you know? And where these people, it takes so many generations to learn how to prepare certain species, you know, to make bows and arrows. We're going to get to the bow and arrow thing. That's a really cool thing later. But I mean, yeah, if you don't have any of that, you got a few months and you're gone. Chapter 4, How to Make a Cultural Species.
This segment is brought to you by your Brother Book sponsors that we don't have yet. But we have a new segment called Brother Book's Key Insight Alert. Okay, so key insight coming up. Quote, natural selection, acting on genes, has shaped our psychology in a manner that generates non-genetic evolutionary processes. Quote, natural selection favored genes for building brains with abilities to learn from others. So that's the sort of the scientific summary of his insight, right?
Yeah, so those brains start selecting for traits of being able to learn. I mean, the environment is selecting for being able to learn complex behaviors from your parents. And so he's saying that the cultural evolution is actually driving our biology in pretty serious ways. I think he's arguing in the book taking over from aspects of the environment, like our culture is what's driving it much more than our environment or any other aspect of where we are at.
Not only are we good at learning from others, we're good at knowing who to learn from, what we should learn from them, and when cultural learning should overrule our own direct experience, right? Obviously, humans look for skills and success, i.e. prestige, in choosing who to mimic, who to copy, who to learn from, right? Tons of studies show babies are great at figuring out if someone else has got it figured out, and therefore are worth modeling.
You know, somebody puts a shoe on their head or something, clearly doesn't know how to use a shoe. They do a behavior or whatever, unlock a box or something in a certain way. And then somebody puts a shoe on their foot, and babies are watching this, and then they unlock a box a different way, and babies are like, oh, did you see that guy put the shoe on his head? You know, they get a sense. It's amazing. Even like, I forget how old they are, but probably not very old, and they know who to watch. They learn prestige very quickly. That's what we've been selected generation after generation after generation, not to follow the idiots of our tribe, follow the people who really know what they're doing. We're good at selecting prestige.
And as we get older, we start mimicking people more similar to us. Little boys and girls, we have all seen this. They mimic older boys and girls. Young athletes mimic pro athletes. Notably and interestingly, apes raised by humans are better at mimicking than apes raised by apes, but human-raised apes still get boat raced in the mimic games by humans.
Boat race?
Dude, you don't know boat raced? Dude, that's a great term. Oh, boat race is just absolutely dominated, dude. They got boat raced, okay? Chapter 5, what are big brains for? or How Culture Stole Our Guts.
Stole our guts.
This chapter starts with another key segment in Brother Books, the central argument. This one's brought to you by Joseph Henrich. Quote, about 2 million years ago, we first crossed the evolutionary Rubicon, and cultural evolution became the primary driver of our species' genetic evolution. Henrich doesn't disappoint. We get a 3-page table. Table compares culturally transmitted selection pressures with co-evolved genetic consequences. That's a lot. Let's give you some examples, okay? Accumulating body of cultural knowledge creates dependence on your tribe. A co-evolved genetic consequence, long childhoods, brain wiring that takes decades.
Yeah, we learn about that in Behave, how our prefrontal cortex doesn't fully log on until we're in our 20s, meaning that that's the part of our brain that's most culturally sensitive. Evolution has wired us for it to be malleable for a long time so that it's like very adaptable to our environment and to whatever culture we're born into. So there's the co-evolved genetic consequence of accumulating cultural knowledge. That's a good one.
Another example, cultural transmitted selection pressure, persistence hunting, genetic consequence, distance running enabled with springy foot arches, slow twitch muscle fibers, lungs that don't get compressed because we're running on 2 feet, a lot of things.
Yeah, good one.
So we needed to be persistence hunters, and so we evolved all these genetic consequences of long distance running, right?
Crazy feet too, a lot of bones in our feet, very complicated feet. Here's the third one, culturally transmitted pressure is we cook our food. The genetic consequence is we have small teeth, weak stomachs, we have not very many jaw muscles. Chimps and gorillas' jaw muscles wrap all the way around to the top of their skull. Ours only go to about like above our ears and stuff. We've got weak ass jaws.
All of our teeth and our lungs and the way we eat and our stomachs are evolved to adapt to cooking, which cooking is a cultural transmission.
It's making more calories available. So if we were eating raw meat, you have to burn a lot more calories to make those calories in the meat accessible. And cooking is almost external digesting is the way to think about it. And that's what enabled our brains. It was almost like a race to be so culturally receptive. You have to have a pretty active brain going on. That's consuming a lot of energy, so you got to be taking in a lot of calories to do that. So you've got to start cooking, and that enabled our brains to get bigger, which enabled more cultural evolution, which enabled, better methods for cooking and hunting and all that. So
some more details here, which are really cool on decades-long brain wiring that we all go through as we age. As brains mature, white matter increases and axonal connections are burned in and wrapped in a performance-enhancing coating of fat called myelin. And myelination makes these brains more efficient but less plastic and less susceptible to learning.
It's basically like it's hard coding in. So let's say you have a movement. Pro golfers on a swing use less brain power to swing because it's so dialed in that the exact pathway of how all the muscles are going to move get myelinated, meaning there's not as much interference coming from other places. If you're learning something new, you're thinking more consciously, there's more like uncertainty there, there's more parts of the brain network that are communicating to make that happen. So myelination is like, nope, I don't need to pay attention to any other brain parts, I got this, So it's less plasticity, less susceptible to learning, but more dialed in and ready. I mean, that's can't teach an old dog new tricks. The old people that just have their way and whatever, you could call it myelination. At all ages, when you compare chimp brain myelination to human brain myelination, it's clear human brains are much more flexible and open to learning. I wonder I guess we do have less white matter maybe than chimps do. That would be the argument, perhaps. Chimps can independently get enough food for themselves. At what age? I would love to poll the audience. What age do you think a chimp can get all the food, live totally fine on its own? This is mind-blowing.
Well, hold on. How old does it take for humans?
We can almost never get all our food on our own.
Yeah, but let's call it caveman humans around 18, maybe 15, 16, 17 or whatever. But that's generally when caveman level humans could get enough food to feed themselves. Mm-hmm. Chimps, it's age 5. That's crazy that they can fend for themselves at age 5. That's wild.
Yeah, he even says human hunters get enough around 18. Although peak strength and speed for human is in our 20s, individual hunting success peaks at age 40. So you're still soaking up knowledge. I mean, you got to figure out, it's a drought year, so go to this area, or, the weather's doing this, or, there's just so many aspects of hunting that isn't just strength and endurance. It's so much more like wisdom and stuff going on. That's amazing. 40. You got to be 40. I mean, that's interestingly, that's peak income too. Maybe not peak. I mean, peak income's probably 50-ish, but still.
Because we discovered fire and cooking, our mouths are the same size as 3-pound squirrel monkeys. Our stomachs are half the size expected for primates of our size. Our colons are super short. So cooking is clearly cultural evolution driving genetic evolution because it reduces digestive work needed from stomach acid. And are we sure that cooking is cultural? Great question. I was kind of having that question myself. Yes, there's examples of whole tribes in the Amazon literally not knowing how to make fire. They forget and they can't figure it out again. That's crazy.
Yeah. There's like tens of societies, probably not hundreds, but tens of societies in the world that we've encountered that just don't have any more fire. It's crazy.
Talk about the walk of shame, the Amazon tribal walk of shame. You got to walk to the other Amazon tribe to be like, can I get some of your fire? I can't forget how to make it, dude.
That's a good walk of shame.
Yeah, not a good walk. And Henrich definitely, he's on evolutionary team distance running. You know, the persistence hunting, what it's called when you just jog down gazelles on the African plains. Our culturally adapted practice of marathon hunting sort of developed. You could also call it savanna sauntering or jungle jogging or plains pursuing. Springy arches in our feet, longer legs, reinforced lower body joints. We got big badonkadonks, and we got the lungs that don't compress because we only run on 2 legs, not 4 like apes. We're the sweatiest species, which also means we lost a lot of hair. We have way more sweat glands than anyone else, okay? Weirdly though, our bodies are terrible at storing water, which is needed for long distance running. So the only way we could have evolved all these long distance running traits is if we had already evolved the culturally transmitted ability to know how to find watering holes and store water in a water bottle. Okay? Mm-hmm. It's like we needed water bottles to be persistence hunters.
That's a cultural thing.
That's a cultural thing, right? And I say it right here, but man, one man's Nalgene is another man's ostrich egg, okay? Like, that's it. And you can't run a gazelle for 6 hours without a water bottle. You just can't chase one down, so...
Can't do it.
The goal with persistence hunting is to slowly jog down much faster animal until it collapses from heat exhaustion. This means persistence hunters need to learn how to track the animal because it's gonna run over the horizon. You gotta know its footsteps, its poop, its patterns. You got to know how to identify the individual animal in its herd because the first thing a gazelle is going to do is run back to its herd. And you don't want to chase a fresh gazelle. You want to chase the gazelle that you already tired out. 4-legged runners have different gaits, which create different optimum speeds, like gear shifts in a car. So horses, they have a walk and a trot and a gallop. Like, that's just a horse. But all of these 4-legged animals have different
modes. When you're at a certain speed, their lugs aren't able to take in as much air or whatever. So if they're at a gallop, they can only gallop for so long before they have to go to a different speed in order to fully utilize their lungs. And humans have learned this. Those are the 40-year-old dudes who are like, oh, you idiots, I'll show you how to run down an animal. And they run at bad speeds for the animals. They're like in between a trot, close to a gallop, kind of put them in their middle ground. So they're basically running more inefficient. That's how we've been learning how to run them down. And that is not something a European dude who just sailed over there can figure out in a few months. That is a lifetime of living out there.
Persistence hunters typically go in the heat of the day. Hardest on humans, even harder on animals. Except they also go after a full moon because they know that full moons will mean that the animals are probably moving around at night a lot. And so
they're tired.
They're high energy for those savannimals, right? So all this knowledge that persistence hunting had to be culturally transmitted. And just to drive it all home, Henrich goes to Africa and spends time with the people who still do persistence hunting. And how do they learn persistence hunting? They watch the older, better persistence hunters and copy what they do, right? Persistence hunters are culturally made, not born, right?
And if they're culturally made and persistence hunting clearly has a huge effect on our biology, that fits his central argument, which is that culture drives genetic evolution. Now,
bang.
Which is bonkers. Chapter 6, why some people have blue eyes and white skin. So we're ignoring migration of people for the last few hundred years, and it's very clear that blue and green eyes are common only in the Baltic Sea region of Northern Europe. And the mystery is why the light eyes and why the light skin. Among northern regions, which is 50 to 55 degrees of latitude, the Baltic Sea is unique in its ability to support agriculture. For whatever reason, the weather patterns and the soil, around 6,000 years ago, people started farming this area. Over time, the Baltic Sea peoples became dependent on agriculture, losing access to fish and other vitamin D-rich foods. Talk about losing cultural know-how, not learning how to fish because you're just digging in the soil all the time. Natural selection favored genes for light skin since lighter skin absorbs more vitamin D from the sun. We've always heard that. Genetic effect of light skin also affects eye color. So the same genes that affect our skin are what affect eye color.
So that's how blue and green eyes developed in the Baltic Sea peoples, right?
Losing the ability to fish and needing to get that vitamin D, boom, green eyes.
White skin, light eyes. Crazy. So that's some of the biological driven cultural evolution stuff that we're talking about. Chapter 7, we get a little bit deeper. Title is On the Origin of Faith. Ladder 1, rung 1, cultural transmission is essential for survival. I think we've established that in this podcast today. So we're not talking about faith in God, but we are talking about faith in cultural customs, right? So another way you could say that is faith in cultural customs is essential for survival. Cultural transmission, same thing. And then we're going to tell you a story to kind of weave it back around to God. So we're going to tell you a story about cassava, which is a major crop in South America. It's also called manioc, also called tapioca. I eat it for dinner almost every day today. This crop is really important for Amazon tribes. It's one of the few crops that Amazon tribes grow, cassava. The trouble with cassava, it's got trace amounts of cyanide. If you eat cassava once or twice, you're fine. Eat it every day for 20 years, you could die from cyanide poisoning. Unless you follow the super labor-intensive cassava processing regimen that the Amazonians have designed and they do follow. Now, here's the question, Jay, and this is really cool. Do any of the tribes know why they follow this cassava processing?
They don't.
Do they know why it's taboo for pregnant women to eat the cassava?
No, but that's a good, I'm glad that they know that. That's a good
I'm glad that they know that too.
Cultural knowledge.
The faith in the cultural custom of cassava processing keeps them alive. Another great example of human groups creating survival-producing customs. The Mapuche people, Jay. You want to cover the Mapuches?
Southern Chile, that's a great name. They're throwing wood ash into their cornmeal. No idea why. Evolution knows why. Because the cornmeal is weak in vitamin B3, and the wood ash has vitamin B3. So the ancient Mapuche weren't reading the barcodes ingredients, you know, they had to figure out over time, like, hey, when I add this, I feel better, or, you know, my children, more accurately, it's probably my children are growing up healthy because our family, we put ash in our cornmeal. And then the next generation has no idea why, but we put ash in our cornmeal. Somebody, I think they said there was like a European explorer there being like, ew, like, why are you guys doing that? And they're like, don't know, no idea why.
We just do it.
Yeah.
A third example, the Naskapi tribe in northern Canada, they have a game theory situation on their hands when they're hunting caribou. The caribou know that they can't repeat the same places, otherwise they'll be predictably hunted down. So the caribou have evolved a random wandering pattern in northern Canada. What do the humans do in response? They have developed a game theory optimal strategy to determine where to hunt. This is how they plan where to hunt. They throw the shoulder blade bone of a caribou into the fire. They read the burn marks on the bone as a map. Jay, that's as random as it can get, which is exactly what they need to be able to hunt the caribou. And they would never tell you, oh, we're just doing a random number generator in the fire.
Yeah.
They got a whole song and dance about it, but like it's still evolved to be culturally optimal, right?
Imagine how much fun they're all having arguing about what the map means. And, you know, no, this is the mountain and the hill, and they're having a blast. And interestingly, the crack marks in bone is how people think that the ancient Chinese script was invented. We found bones with like carvings that were kind of ornamented off of the natural cracks they got from cooking these bones. And those are what turned into, they're called the oracle bones, and they developed into the Chinese script with all those crazy lines and stuff. So that gives you a little flavor of cooking bones and cool patterns.
Where else can you get caribou hunting plans connected to Chinese writing, all with bone remnants? Only at the Brother Books Podcast.
Books Brothers Podcast. Humans are clearly benefiting from mimicking the customs of their forebears and their neighbors. So much so that in a lab, it's proven that humans will mimic completely illogical steps in a process. This is, you know, kind of tied in with the cornmeal and the, you know, the random number generator. It's almost important that we don't know why we do things and we still do them anyway, which can introduce illogical steps. They did tests. Somebody was mimicking, showing how to do a behavior, and they introduced a bunch of random steps before they opened this box. Maybe they hopped on one foot, maybe they, took off their shoe, whatever. The chimps are like, that didn't look relevant at all. And the baby's like, I'm doing it whole hog. Exactly how that person did it, I'm doing it. So in a basic puzzle solving test, humans are the ones that copy the irrelevant hand gestures, and chimps cut to the chase. And here, this is an interesting one. Human mimicking propensity goes up with age. I would not have thought that. The older you are, the more likely you are to mimic unnecessary steps. That is surprising.
Chapter 8, Prestige, Dominance, and Menopause. So this chapter, we're going to discuss how humans decide who to mimic, which starts with prestige and dominance detecting brain software that's pre-installed on baby brains. We've covered this in other books, but this chapter has got such a fascinating story on cultural customs leading to survival, so we're going to start there. I love this story. Strap in. 1943, Australian outback, the western desert, literally the drought of the century. All of the various hunter-gatherer bands are in search for water. Small tribe with a wise old leader named Parle-g has trudged hundreds of miles visiting all the water sources. Can't find anything. After months, they're like, we got one big main water source, never dries up. That's our last chance. They go there. All the tribes are already there. Parle-g's people are last in line. No chance they're going to get the water they need. Parle-g does the most epic thing ever, and I'm getting goosebumps right now telling you guys this story.
It's like straight out of a fantasy novel.
Dude, it's crazy that this is true. Parle-g sings the nursery rhymes that his grandparents taught him when he was a small boy.
So that could be going back to like 70 years before, he could be that old.
And these nursery rhymes turn out to be a verbal map and leads his small band into the unknown desert, all based on this little song. And, I'm sure he's singing the songs and he's telling his tribe, he's like, hey guys, I'm going to follow the song. And they're like, you're insane. Like what? And he's like, it's our last chance. They follow the song and what do you know? They find water, right? Just
That's amazing.
Unbelievable, dude. So his tribe survived because they had a really good prestige detection software installed. We're following Parle-g. He knows what's up, right?
The knowledge was stickily transmitted. It wasn't just transmitted, but it had to stick for 70 years. And how do you get it to stick? You add a little a ringtone to it. That is why humans evolved menopause. Because the longer you stick around, the better chance you have to pass on key survival details to your grandkids. You could be the grandma helping out, like Parle-g. Childbirth is so dangerous for women. It's almost like it's not worth it for you to have any more kids. You need to just stick around and transmit all of your knowledge to the next generations moving on. And interestingly, I think we get to this, elephants and whales also experience menopause. Two of the most cultural and, with the most memory and the most reading information from their other forebears. So
how about this, Jay? 1993, huge drought in Tanzania. Researchers tracked movements of 21 elephant families, and the oldest elephant grandmas were the ones that helped their family survive because the oldest elephant grandmas who had experienced menopause remembered the location of far-flung water sources that they hadn't been to in over 60 years. Longer life gives you a better chance to pass on the key survival info, not just in humans.
Yeah, it's sometimes that key survival info could only be relevant once every 150 years, So if Parle-g's song he heard when he was, 70 years ago, his grandparents could have been 70 years old. They learned it when they were kids. You could go back 100, just like this elephant. They live a long time. That could be transmitting 150-year information. That's the absolute key to make it out that bottleneck for that little tribe or, your group to survive. Just unbelievable. It's very cool. And interestingly, humans have similarly went through a bottleneck around 70,000 years ago. They think humans went down to somewhere like sub 10,000 humans ever were alive at one time. Maybe there was a big volcanic eruption or something. But yeah, they think there was a really, really big bottleneck. It's just interesting to think like there could have been some songs or, cultural know-how that seemed crazy at the time that allowed certain small groups to make it out whatever bottleneck event was happening back then.
That's crazy. Chapter 9, In-laws, Incest Taboos, and Rituals. And I gotta say, you can't consider your book a real science book unless you attack the preeminent scientists in your field. That's just every science book we ever read. Henrich's no exception, although he does lack in quality scientific trash talk. Unfortunate for Henrich, but that's okay. He still
like
attacks.
Too polite a guy.
And Jay, who's he going to go after? In chapters 9 to 12, he goes after two of the big boys. Who's he got?
Dawkins and Pinker.
Yeah, dude.
Both these guys basically boil human cooperation down to, I help my gene pool survive. That's all I'm doing is, all I care about is my genes, making it into the next generation. Summed up by our favorite quote, I will lay down my life for 2 brothers or 8 cousins. Because we're just all calculating gene percentages and relation, kin relation groups, and that's how we decide to divvy up our charitable acts.
Richard Dawkins is he's the genetic pool percentages guy.
It's the selfish gene. Henrich says that gene pool life raft theory is part of it, but ain't all of it. And he seems much more amenable to the group selection. He never brings it up, doesn't have to come up to talk about cultural evolution. But he says that we have such complex societies outside of our immediate relation groups because that's how we're influenced and learning everything. So you almost have to get outside your gene pool and do nice things for outside your gene pool for that knowledge to spread enough to actually have an effect on our genetic evolution.
Henrich quote, survival hinges on culturally constructed social norms, not just gene pool life rafts based on relatedness percentages. Hey, Doc Boy, let's add some nuance, bruh. Like, come on. We start with tribes with weird human practice of pair bonding, or marriage, as my wife likes to call it. It's a weird behavior, right? Pair bonding increases survival rates. If your dad knows you are his, he's more likely to like you and keep you alive. But weirdly, not all cultures pair bond, and examining those that don't pair bond shows how much work cultural norms are doing to keep the pair bond survival benefits alive. So
yeah, that's all very interesting stuff. And I think part of cultures that don't pair bond have a lot more warfare because there's a lot more inequality among the men. Some dudes got lots of wives, many dudes don't. So they're like, let's go get some wives from that tribe over there. They kill some guys, bring some women back. All of a sudden, there's much less men going around, and so it almost it's hard to get into a pair bonding thing when you're in that whole situation, So it's interesting how groups are able to evolve the pair bonding thing. He talks about the Ache, but the Ache, I think, are famous non-pair bonders.
Neurologists, every book on neurology has Phineas Gage, who got a spike through his prefrontal cortex. Every sociology book talks about the Ache. It's the anthropologist peer review process includes Control F Ache. If it's not in there, you didn't write a good enough book, right? So you got to be a minimum of 5 hits probably. And we remember from Behave, but the Ache are the people that bang the hammer into the back of heads of old ladies who are slowing the tribe down. So they're not known for their, fuzzy wuzzies in that tribe. Stands to reason that they got some crazy pair bonding practices, and Jay, they do.
To the Ache, a marriage is just someone you're sleeping with at night. Crazy. No official rituals. Divorce, just stop sleeping with that person. By age 30, Ache women have experienced 10 marriages, and the divorce rate of their first marriage is 100%. 0% chance they're still sleeping with the same guy. Men marry the mother, then the daughter of the same family, or marry sisters at the same time. Whoa. They're probably killing other guys, which makes the pool of men much lower, which gives them, ironically, more power to, take more women because there's not enough men to go around. It's kind of sad.
I wouldn't want to be an Ache and another anthropologist special. I wouldn't want to be a Na, the Na people in China. Quote, despite aggressive efforts by the Chinese government to enforce preferred pair bonding practices, there are no fathers in Na culture. They don't even have a word in the language for father or husband in this culture. Na guys sneak into the houses of Na girls and give it the old smash and dash, right? That's how they have sex. There's also lots of examples of tribes who believe in multiple fathers. Ladies get knocked up and then keep on knocking up to make sure they get the best traits of all their favorite guys. Data shows that kids with 2 fathers are more likely to survive than kids with 1 or 3 fathers. So coming back to our scientific trash talk, take that, Dawkins. How do you account for kinship survival where everyone's kin's all mixed up? 2 dads and 10 husbands. Henrich is really saying, hey, Docky boy, biology ain't enough. You need anthropology too. Henrich's take, a lot of what Dawkins is saying, keeping our genes alive, is actually keeping our social groups alive with social norms like marriage, child rearing, meat sharing, cooking, etc. Right?
Yeah, and those social norms are what keeping our genes alive, and the social norms are more group-based and not necessarily kin-related. So we get into some pages about the uniting effects of group rituals like synchronous singing, marching, music making. We talked about that in Behave too, how good it feels.
Yep.
And extreme physical exhaustion. I wonder what we're going to talk about that. 3, feelings of common fate. And 4, slicing every teenage boy's penis lengthwise like a butterflied hot dog. How about that?
Dude.
That is great bonding.
That's uniting effects of group rituals, right? So this all contributes to group spirituality, kind of, and leads people to say things like, that guy is my brother.
Check out his penis.
Yeah, dude. We got the same sliced open. Wow. There's whole books on this. We're kind of, like, I'm mentioning this stuff because it's in this chapter. We're skipping over it because there's actually whole books on groups and psychedelics and, you know, spirituality with like group uniting and all that, circles around the fire and the whole thing. But we're kind of like, that's an important part of cultural evolution, but we're just kind of going over it. So,
yeah.
Haidt talks about it a lot, you know, college football, singing the same song on Saturdays, the whole thing. So, Chapter 10, Jay, intergroup competition shapes cultural evolution. What do we got?
Now we're going up a level to intergroup competition shaping what the cultural evolution is about. Different groups are evolving different social norms, and some of those norms are better than others. Like if we've got a social norm of always keeping a fire at our village, better than not having a fire. When groups compete, groups with more effective social norms win. And we go over the way groups compete and how their social norms actually affect the outcome of the competition. So how do groups compete? We got war, we got regular old differential survival. Can you raise a bunch of kids? We've got differential migration. Are you going to the better areas? And differential reproduction, I guess how many kids you guys are having at one time. If your group has customs that help you compete in these areas, chances are other competing groups will eventually copy you. And I love these examples coming up. We've got a tribe in New Guinea that is kicking ass at pig raising, much better at raising pigs than any of the other tribes around. They got the fattest pigs. What does the tribe next door that has the skinny, dumb pigs? They copy the other tribe's pig raising rituals, which includes feeding the pigs more sweet potatoes. Totally makes sense. Also includes not killing pigs who misbehave. Makes sense. You're going to have more pigs if you don't kill the ones that wander into other people's gardens. And then this one makes total sense. They're playing flutes for the pigs because the pigs obviously like flute music. So perfect example of just like, let's just bring it all. You know, we don't know which ones are causal. So just go whole hog.
Nice on the whole hog. Nice.
Another tribe in New Guinea had a religion that preached tolerance and spent more time focusing on harmony within the tribe members. So that tribe has less intra-group squabbles and experienced significant in-group migration and got stronger because their religion's spreading, more people love their tribe, having more kids, whatever.
This is how humans culturally evolve. And I guess I'm going to drop a non sequitur quote that's in this chapter, but it just makes me think, dude. So here you go. Quote, over time, history suggests that all pro-social institutions age and eventually collapse at the hands of self-interest, unless they are renewed by the dynamics of intergroup competition. Wow.
It's almost like that's like the bit of the free rider problem taking you down, but you have to almost be competing, you know, with another group to be reinvigorating those social norms to keep free riders at bay. Because if your group's doing fine and there's no competition, free riders are eventually going to climb up, you know, the ladder and start, you know, taking more power or whatever it is.
Individuals will figure out how to game your system, and unless it's tested from the outside, it'll eventually collapse. Very interesting. So,
yeah. Mortality
rates of chimp intergroup conflicts.
We led perfectly right into that.
Dude, yeah, exactly. That was good. Dude, that was a subtextual transition.
What is the mortality rate?
4 to 13% on chimps. That's how much people. That's how many chimps percentage that die in chimp war.
Hand-to-hand combat. Research on hunter-gatherer cemeteries puts the mortality rate to war among hunter-gatherers at the high end of that range, 13%. That is so, I mean, that's a lot of people that you know. 1 in every 5 to 10, boom, done. Killed by another man.
It's weird that we have the same percentage of intergroup deaths as chimps. That's weird.
Chapter 11, Self-Domestication. Study from the Max Planck Institute, Great Institute in Germany. They give some basic toys, a demonstrator, and a puppet. So 3-year-olds are watching the demonstrator use the toys while the puppet is sleeping.
The 3-year-olds are watching the demonstrator, and the puppet is sleeping. Afterwards, the puppet wakes up and uses the toys differently than the demonstrator did. The kids hate this. That's not how you use those toys. Even the puppet is using the toys so-called logically, and the degree to which the child corrects the puppet is also based on the degree of confidence displayed by the demonstrator. A couple of QED quotes to kind of sum up that study there. By observing others, children spontaneously infer context-specific rules for social life. And the author travels the world to show that no matter the culture, everybody does this, and everybody has punishments when inferred social norms aren't followed.
At 6 months, infants preferentially prefer people who speak in mom's accent. That's like in Behave, we talk about like racist babies. At 3 years, they more readily pick same accent friends. Linguistic markers beat racial markers. Wow. So maybe we're not racist, we just like their own language, because the language is like a reflection of the culture where race might not be.
Different skin color, same accent kids are more likely to be friends than same skin color, different accent kids. Crazy. So identifying who's in our social group is more important than who's in our genetic group, because now we have the same norms and the same punishments for breaking them, and that's more important to us, right? Chapter 12, our collective brains. This episode of We're All Just Culture Copiers is brought to you by studies of collective intelligence across the world. How well can different cultures retain and pass on information?
It differs, but basically collective intelligence is based on 1, the size of the collective, and 2, the interconnectedness of the group. And your proof is that big Pacific islands, so they did, this is a good natural study. The Polynesians spreading out over all those islands in the Pacific. You've got big Pacific islands with lots of people, and there's a lot more types. If you categorize all the tools and the fishing strategies and everything, there's a lot more complexity going on over the small Pacific islands, which are less sophisticated. And then this leads to my favorite story of the Aboriginal Tasmanians, who, it's a very sad story in a way. They're separated from mainland Australia 12,000 years ago when the sea levels rise after the Ice Age. So they're, boom, cut off on an island now. And the group of Tasmanians has less tools today than many ancient societies did 10,000 years ago. I mean, it's amazing that they can even find that there's more tools buried somewhere than there are being used by the Tasmanians when they arrived, because they forgot all of the cultural know-how. They were cut off. Their group probably wasn't big enough to preserve it. It has to be a certain size. They even forgot how to make fire and how to fish. And it was a poor, sad society. And maybe we're being too harsh on the Tasmanians, but I mean, if you don't have fire and you're not fishing, that's a tough life. Archaeological digs shows that they had more tools and better technology 3,000 years ago, but they eventually forgot how to make the stuff. That is crazy. That would be sad to be digging up tools that are better than what you were using. Wow.
Henrich takes a side shot at Neanderthals. He hypothesizes that we overtook them because humans were better at cultural learning than Neanderthals. Neanderthals had larger individual brains, but smaller collective brains. We're better copiers. We culturally evolutionized better than you. We win.
Yeah, right? They could have been individually smarter, but worse at copying each other. And so therefore, you're not competing against that little group right there. You're competing about everybody that's connected with his group. Any single person that could have invented a better method for making a stone tool, or a better method for building a fire in the winter, or whatever it is, the pool of competition was just immense compared to probably the tool that he was dealing with. You could be in Spain and you could be firing arrows off with stones that came from the Baltics or something, because we had trade networks that big way back then. It's tough for those Neanderthals. They couldn't do it. Chapter 13, Communicative Tools with Rules. What's a book on human culture without a chapter on language? How about that? Of course.
What is it, dude? It ain't a good one. Tell you that.
Linguistic skills effortlessly, miraculously emerge in young children without explanation, he says.
Even skilled orators and esteemed podcast hosts can't explain the structure beneath the serial flow of sound issuing from our mouths.
We come close, though. We're better than most.
We're doing our best. Obviously, language arises from long-term cumulative cultural evolution. I mean, that's what language is, right? And we're going to explore how different cultures have developed different languages. It's a really cool example of cultural evolution. So one of the key insights to language and culture, small cultures have small vocabularies. Big cultures have big vocabularies. Cultures with taboos on speaking after a close relative dies have more developed sign language, and the degree of expressiveness in the sign language is determined by the length of time cultural norms require you to grieve after a death. The social norm creating how much sign language you have, right? Mm-hmm. Cultures with big areas have created long-distance communications like hand signals and whistle languages. The Plains Indians, famously in the United States, have long-distance sign language. Cultures in Turkey and Mexico have whistle languages highly developed for communicating across mountain passages and mountain gorges. Unfortunately, I'd be mute in the whistle culture. I can't whistle still. I'm still working on it, but we're getting there. Even climate, Jay, can influence the type of language. Hot climates means people spend more time outside, meaning communicators face more troubles with communicating across distance with outside noise, bad acoustics. So vowels are more sonorous, meaning easier to increase volume, and the research is conclusive that hot climates create languages with more vowels and cold climates create languages with more consonants. The perfect example of a consonant-heavy language is Russian, right? It's very heavily consonant.
Probably German, too.
German, too.
Vocabulary expands as the culture expands. That makes sense. The Bible and Homer, both wonderfully descriptive, both only have 3 colors. In the Bible and in the Iliad and the Odyssey, black, white, and red. They don't have blue. That is crazy. They don't talk about blue or green. Wow. But not just your vocabulary expands, but grammatical rules do as well. Here's a grammar test. We've got a few sentences here. I don't know how, do you know how to read these?
Yeah, I got you, dude. This is grammatical rules evolving over time. So here's like a little fun grammar test in the book that's really cool. He tells you a story like a caveman would tell it to you. Girl fruit pick, turn mammoth see. Girl run, tree reach, climb. Mammoth tree shake. Girl yell, father run, spear throw. Mammoth yell, mammoth fall. And I say right there after, I'm like, dude, great story, caveman. I got you, man. I'm with it. I know what happened, right? I'm learning Portuguese right now, and that's pretty much how I sound in Portuguese, I'm pretty sure. But
mammoth yell, mammoth fall.
Yeah, but we get the story. But we've clearly evolved quite a bit of grammatical rules since that caveman story was being told, right? So that's what he's describing is like the larger the culture, the more intricate the grammatical rules, not only the vocabulary.
He's talking a little bit about some biological evolution, how our larynx push down into our throat to widen our vocal range, how we have deeper axonal connections from our neocortex through the spinal cord into our mouth to improve dexterity with hands and tongues, how we have whitened our eyes to cue gaze direction to others. That's a good one. I think about that a lot. That's, most other animals don't have white eyes. They don't need them. Nobody cares in their species. But we, wherever we're looking, is very important. That's very interesting information for everybody else. And then the last one, other mammals and human babies can breathe and swallow at the same time, but we lose this ability because of that. I think our larynx pushing down into our throats makes it easier for us to communicate, also makes it easier for us to choke on our own food.
Ouch. Communication is more important than choking.
Way more important.
He does love the evolution of language, but he does sort of at the end of this chapter, he kind of pushes back on the professors who say, language is the Rubicon crossing that allowed us to communicate and then dominate the world. He's like, dude, don't overemphasize language. It's one of the many culturally constructed behaviors. It's not the only one, right?
Yeah.
It's the ability to culturally construct behaviors that's the Rubicon, not the culturally constructed behavior of language. Yeah. Bang.
Bang.
That's
a good one.
That's cool. Chapter 14, Enculturated Brains and Honorable Hormones. Picking a romantic partner is hard. Lots of data points and lots of forecasting. A brain efficiency hack. How about instead of picking one for yourself, just observe who other people think is good and go with that. I don't have to do all this forecasting and hypothesizing. Researchers have shown that behavior, what do other people think, is super programmed into our brains, right? Makes sense. The guy talking to all the hot girls is obviously worth pursuing over the guy by himself in the corner. Like, we all kind of feeling know that.
Other girls are vetting him, then there's something there, and which is true. That's a lot of information that they're giving you. If I'm laughing, I'm enjoying it, or whatever, he's already got enough qualities for me to, go over there, and, it's good enough for other people, good enough for me, basically.
Yep. There's a bunch of studies where people rate faces, or we could call them yearbook Yelp studies. But in these studies, they manipulate what people will rate faces. Like, 1 to 10, how hot is this face, right? But they can manipulate your rating if they have multiple people rating at the same time, and the first rater, which is secretly a plant in the study, rates the people higher than they should. So the rest of the study participants will rate them higher too. You could turn a 6 into a 9 if the first person says, oh, that's a 9. Now everyone else who'd normally say 6 says it's an 8, it's a 9, it's an 8, it's a 9, right? It's crazy how much that first person's opinion affects our own. We are offloading the thinking to other people.
100%. It's also, if we're ever called into a study, there's always a plant. That's the whole point of the study.
Yeah, dude, there's a plant in this study, yeah.
It's about how you're reacting to the plant. I feel like every single study there's a plant. Brain scans have shown that shifting to align with other people is neurologically rewarding and results in enduring neurological modifications. So what do we mean by that? If you are agreeing with the rest of the plants in the study about how hot the person is, you're like, oh, this feels good. In a certain way, there is no ground truth because you're just basing it on other people who are basing it on either what the professor told them to say or their own made up whatever. It's very interesting with humans. No ground truth.
And we can get data on what other humans think a lot of different ways. One of them is it's just a price on an item that indicates other people's value of this item, the price. If it's a high price, high value, right? High-priced wines have way higher scores than priceless blind wine tests. Price is telling me, hey, other people like this, so our brain says I like this. People will even drink the same wine twice but don't know it, and they hate the fake cheap wine and love the fake expensive wine. It's the same wine, bro.
It's exactly the same thing as this rating it a 9. Oh, other people rated it a 9. If I don't think it's a 9, I'm missing out on something, which, in evolutionary time is a good adaptation.
The power of cultural beliefs. Jay, do you remember this Chinese astrology study do you remember this one?
I love where this is going.
This one is crazy. Chinese astrology kills people. Lots of people. Chinese astrology suggests that you're more susceptible to certain diseases dependent upon your birth year phase. So you're in the fire year, the earth year, the metal year, whatever. Scientists look at cause of death from 1969 to 1990 in California. They noticed huge spikes in death for Chinese American populations when they experienced a disease birth year combination that Chinese astrology suggested would be fatal to them. And this spike was not seen in non-Asian cultures.
Gotta have a control.
That spike was lower for Chinese American men than Chinese American women because Chinese American women are more probable to live in astrology. The conclusion here, belief in Chinese astrology took as many as 9 years off the lives of many Chinese Americans. So basically what happened is it's like, I'm a fire year, and oh my goodness, fire says that I will die in the year of the wood. And then when the year of the wood comes and they get sick, they're like, oh my God, this is my death. That's, I'm going to die.
It could be fire says you're susceptible to certain types of disease.
Yeah.
If you happen to get that disease, that's it, I'm cooked. Give it up and die.
Yeah.
So these are showing how cultural beliefs affect the structure of our brain and our personal experience, our personal preferences, and our whole life cycle.
Crazy.
Chapter 15, when we crossed the Rubicon.
The crucial event in the history of our species involved crossing the threshold into a regime of cumulative cultural evolution, which has driven human genetic evolution ever since. Chimps don't have culture. Quote from a guy who studied chimps his whole life here. Quote, it is inconceivable that you would ever see two chimpanzees carrying a log together.
Michael Tomasello. Then, so we've got Australopiths. That's our first Homo species. All time. I don't know how they decide the line between Homo and non-Homo, but Australopithecines, or Australopiths, are first Homos in history, probably a few million years ago. They would develop, then lose tools. Quote, Our lineage probably danced around the starting line for a long time. One group would cross the threshold and begin to very slowly accumulate cultural know-how, only to have those cultural products lost when the group was broken up or decimated by environmental shifts, diseases, conflicts, blah, blah, blah. I love this phrase, dancing on the edge of culture. That's what the Tasmanians were doing. They had them 3,000 years ago, and they slowly lose them over time. So we had Australopithecines, then we got Homo erectus, which is the first ape to use fire, which is culture. And Henrich says that we crossed the threshold to a cultural species, probably in Homo erectus, around 1.8 million years ago, when we started relying more on our tools to help us with big game hunting and cooking the big game. That drove genetic shifts that changed our feet, our legs, our guts, our teeth, our brains. 750,000 years ago, there's a site in Israel that shows complex tools made by Homo sapiens. And that site in Israel shows a hearth maintained for years. That's a good sign of some culture going on. Like, let's talk about ancient city. We keep our fire alive, and this is the fire of our ancestors. You know, whatever reason you need to keep that fire going, no matter what, is going to be a good cultural adaptation, good social norm to develop. They found in this site 750,000 years ago that humans moved giant rock slabs around for whatever reason, maybe worship or maybe just, planting. And last, that we gathered and processed diverse plants, which we probably weren't doing before. Leads us to chapter 16, Why Us?
Henrich here discusses what he calls the startup problem. How do you start evolving culture when there's not enough culture to work with? Why would our brains evolve to be big enough when there's just no culture?
Yeah, when there's not enough reason to, like you're not picking up anything culturally, but, that's a very interesting thought. You need to have written a whole book to even think about that problem,
I know.
I love when they come up with something that's like that clever or be like, dang, it's good stuff.
It is good stuff. I've thought that a few times while we're doing this outline. Like, he had to go through this whole process of writing the book to come up with these new questions, right? It's really cool.
Oh, yeah. He says two things are responsible for us overcoming the culture startup problem. Group size increases, which means more cultural accumulation, and it also means we talk about in Behave or Sapiens, how the group size influences your prefrontal cortex brain, because you have to be able to manage so many relationships and reputational gossip and all that stuff. It just gets very complex. So I think just naturally from group size increasing, your brain gets bigger. But then his other big one, which is very, very fascinating, is pair bonding. More stable social structures, transferring knowledge more efficiently across generations. Quote, pair bonding and the resultant kinship networks played a crucial role in expanding the circle of care beyond immediate maternal care, fostering a more intricate web of social learning and support. Other quote, the division of labor between men and women in human societies is rooted in a division of information, with cultural evolution leading to specialized knowledge and skills that complement each other within social groups.
Chapter 17, A New Kind of Animal. Culture is a major evolutionary transition from prokaryotes to eukaryotes, from single cell to multicell, one intelligence to group intelligence. That's Henrich, right? Big leaps. He says cultural evolution has been driving genetic evolution for tens of thousands of years. Thus, we are literally the beginnings of a new kind of animal. And Jay, why don't you bring us home one last time with a great quote to finish us off?
Quote, to bring the ideas together that I've just developed in this book, let me now pose a series of key questions and lay out my answers. Why are humans unique? The answer to why humans are different is that we crossed the Rubicon. Cultural evolution became cumulative. And then both this accumulating body of information and its cultural products developed as the central driving force in genetic evolution. We missed the tiniest bit that I really wanted to read about making an arrow. I feel like this is just the perfect aspect that makes it home, like all the complex things to survive. Among the Fuegians, the Tierra del Fuego, the very southern tip of South America, and there's a 14-step procedure that's the best way to make an arrow, using 7 different tools, 6 different materials. And here are the steps. I love how he breaks this down. Begin by selecting the wood for the shaft, which preferably comes from chara, a bushy evergreen shrub, strong and light, but it's a non-intuitive choice because the gnarled branches require extensive straightening. So why not start with straighter branches? So he's going to ask these questions like, You do it this way, but why not the other way? The wood is heated, straightened with craftsman teeth, and eventually finished with a scraper. Then, using a preheated and grooved stone, the shaft is pressed into the grooves, rubbed back and forth, pressing it down with a piece of fox skin. The fox skin becomes impregnated with the dust, which prepares it for the polishing stage. And does it have to be fox skin? Then we've got bits of pitch gathered from the beach, chewed, mixed with ash. What if you don't include the ash? The mixture is then applied to both ends of the heated shaft, which must be coated with a white clay. What about red clay? Do you have to heat the clay? This prepares the ends for the fletching and the arrowhead. 2 feathers are used, preferably from the upland geese. Why not chicken feathers? Right-handed bowmen must use feathers from the left wing of the bird, and vice versa. That is good stuff. Feathers are lashed to the shaft using sinews from the back of the guanaco. After they're smoothed and thinned with water and saliva, why not sinews from the fox? I already killed a fox for the skin. Can't we use those sinews? No. Our culture uses the guanaco. Next is the arrowhead, which must be crafted and attached to the shaft. And of course, there's also the bow, quiver, archery skills, and we'll leave it there since you get the idea. Thank you, Joseph.
Dude, that arrow is what a good summary of cultural evolution, right? Like, we have the best arrows, group competition. No one person figured out that whole process, right? That's like a bunch of people making it better over a long period of time.
And
wow.
If you wanted those arrows, you might as well copy the way they sing and they dance and the way they pair bond, and you have no idea what's causally causing anything. There's a little story called Chesterton's Fence. It's a simple rule of thumb that this guy Chesterton came up with, was that you should never destroy a fence or change a rule or do away with a tradition until you understand why it's there in the first place. So he's talking about you're walking through the countryside, there's a fence. Who put this fence there? Take it down. Well, if there's a fence, somebody, it helped somebody somehow, and you have no idea because you're only able to see to the horizon, where if there's a fence there, it was there years or generations before or whatever, and so there's a lot of accumulated wisdom and whatever traditions, and it's hard to get at what aspects of the tradition or whatever are worth copying or causally related to whatever effect you're looking at. It's good stuff.
Thank you, Henrich, for teaching us a ton about humanity and about ourselves. Like, our real special sauce is this culture, and culture really comes from people mimicking and copying and learning from each other, right? And that's how we created the special sauce, crossed the evolutionary Rubicon, and became masters of planet Earth.
It was a great book. Really loved it. And I'm reading Weird right now. That sounds like a good book. I mean, talk about somebody who's just made waves in the bookosphere, Joseph Henrich.
Dude, we're surfing your waves, Henrich. Appreciate it, bro.
Thanks so much for listening. Follow us on Instagram, on X, on YouTube, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Like and subscribe. We're going to keep putting out content 1 a month. Best shit's coming out for the next couple years.